So when I talk to people about what I do, a lot of it came down to, what do I title myself? And I've finally came down to being the owner and chief storyteller of Digital Rain. And when I tell people that I'm a storyteller, I use a story to convey that. And the story goes, this comes from my parents because I was probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years old. And we were at the church that my parents got married in, and it was the church that my grandparents went to. And a man stood up and asked for all the children to come forward. And as a child, I went forward. And he asked if anybody had ever been to a circus. And I guess I started taking off talking about a family trip to the circus in very high detail and elaborating, and I guess with a lot of exuberance. And I went on to the point where my father had to come up and grab me and take me back to the church pew. And so at the end of the service, my mother went up to the man who was leading the children's time, because she just happened to have gone to school with him. And she started apologizing, and he interrupted her, and he said, Rodney described the circus much better than I ever could have, and it was much more interesting, and all the kids were listening to him and everything else, so it's really not that big of a deal. And at that point, my mom leaned over to him and said, he's never been to a circus. So I've been somebody who's been making up stories and telling stories, and even things that I haven't even been to, apparently, since I was a very young age. So telling stories is what I've always wanted to do. When I actually started high school, I wasn't actually in the high school building. That was the top 3 grades. So I was still in the junior high. And I think for Christmas, my 8th grade year, I had gotten a 35 millimeter still camera. So I was looking for reasons to use that. And when my freshman year started, a friend of mine who also got a camera, he and I would go to football games and stuff and start taking pictures. And we both kind of got recruited. He kind of went to the school newspaper. I went to the yearbook, ended up being the photo editor for the yearbook. And then my next year when I went to the high school had a radio station, so I took radio class. And as I was going through that, the high school also had a television station. And I guess I was kind of putting things together and thinking, I can take photography, I can make the images move, and I can take radio and put that together, and you have television. And so the last 2 years of my high school, I actually took television classes. And my last year, I actually did a 15-minute television show each week. So that's really where I got the idea that not only did I want to be a storyteller, but I also wanted to use video to tell stories. And of course, at the time, there was little or no video production. Everything was television at the time. But the industry has really changed to that, to where it's all about video and telling a story and having that story maybe get someone to take action. So at about the same time that I was telling stories about circuses, when I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, my birthday's in the summer. So one summer I remember that I learned how to ride a bicycle, and then the next summer I was learning how to ride a motorcycle. So I'm at about a half a century of riding a motorcycle, but the story with that I always like to tell is I'd start out on a little motorcycle in my parents' front yard, and I would go straight across the yard and have to turn right and not get the throttle and the braking and everything right, and I'd just end up falling over. So I would turn the bike back up, and I'd go straight across the yard, try to make a right turn, and fall over. And I don't know how many times I fell over, but at one point I actually got it so I could make nice ovals in the front yard, making great right turns, until my father would come out and he would give me the one more lap sign. and I realized that I had to turn left to get the bike back in the garage, and of course I fell over and had to ride the bike to get it back up. So if I don't have a camera on my shoulder, there's a chance that I have a set of handlebars in my hands riding a motorcycle, because I grew up with, my dad kind of doing a side gig before side gigs were really a thing. He would buy motorcycles and parts in boxes, and we would bring them home and we would put them together and we would ride them for a while, and then we would sell them, and we'd take that money to buy more motorcycles that we would do that with. I don't know how much money he ever made, if he made any money. I know he saved a lot with my brother and I as free labor, putting the bikes back together, but we got the reward of riding them. About the same time when I was probably in my 20s or so, probably late 20s, early 30s, that kind of changed to where you couldn't buy bikes and parts like that for a really good price anymore. So flipping bikes like that really just did not become a business anymore. And I wanted to settle down. I wanted to ride more and not work on them as much. And I think my dad came to the same conclusion about the same time my brother did. So we all got bikes that were newer, that we could ride, that were a little bit more reliable. And we actually started doing, more than just day trips or running errands with them. We did trips on the motorcycle. And then around the year 2000, when I was starting my business, I ran into something called Cruiser Club USA, which was a motorcycle riding club, and they had an annual get-together every year somewhere, usually on the eastern side of the country. And so I started riding a motorcycle longer and traveling more, and that meant that I had to have a bike that was a little newer, a little more reliable, so I started moving up and up, to eventually where I had the chance to buy my first new motorcycle. And this was a brand new motorcycle that was fresh out of the crate. When I bought it, it had 0.2 of a mile on it. And I told myself I'm going to ride this bike to 100,000 miles. And I was able to do that, and I ended up selling it. It had about 109,000 miles on it. Like I said, walking, talking, and motorcycling are probably the three things that I've done the longest in my life. Shortly thereafter is storytelling, and not too long after that is telling stories using video. So when I got out of college, I bounced around a lot of different jobs, so I really didn't have stability in that kind of department. But when I landed at the public broadcast station, about the same time I had met a woman, and we would actually have a relationship for the entire time that I worked at the PBS station, which was about 14 years. And I was 40 years old then, and a lot of people could look at it and say I had a midlife crisis, because within the same few month period, I ended that relationship, and I also left the public broadcast station and pursued Digital Rain full time as my only job. So I could definitely see why people would look at that and think, wow, you're crazy. But it's just how the timing worked out, and how it did it. I was lucky enough that later that year I met another woman, and one of the things that really clicked for us, because our first date didn't, and that's a whole nother story. So the second date, to make sure things work, I brought the motorcycle and we went for a motorcycle ride. And in that time, which has been about 15 years now, she's ridden well over 50,000 miles with me to all kinds of different states, and different places. Of course, she was the reason that we picked up and we moved to Costa Rica for a year. And she's the reason that we came here to North Carolina, which I really, making a big move like that, you can certainly question it, but it's been just an incredible thing that we've done. We really love it here in North Carolina. So we waited 10 years to the day that we met to actually get married, which was 3 days short of my 50th birthday. And I had never been married before, and I'm not her first husband. So we would tell everybody that I had no experience and she wasn't very good at it, and that's why we waited 10 years to get married. And now that's been over 5 years ago, and we've certainly done a lot more things together. Bought a house together, and we've done a lot of traveling on two wheels and in the car with camping. So what else do I add about my life? I guess we can kind of look toward the future of what I expect. I really enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I don't ever really see stopping. I have ideas and things that come to me that that I want to write down and that I want to create, and some of them are ideas that I want to share, and that's why I write them down. So I don't, it's hard to turn that off. And my wife, Kristen, she worries about the fact that I'll never retire, or sometimes, we look at retirement and I figure out a way to almost make it be a job, being retired and what we're doing. But I do certainly see a slowing down of things. But right now I'm really energized with the past year or so, going through the Leadership Stanley program and seeing what all goes on in my county, and then being partnered with the Chamber of Commerce and the local newspaper. I guess keep avoiding retirement as long as I possibly can, with having someone next to me kicking and scratching and telling me, retire, retire, retire.